Welcome to the Camp Owners Podcast, a space for camp owners to talk about the unique aspects of camp ownership and get inspired by each other. We are going to sit down with camp industry experts, leaders, and fellow camp owners to hear how the camp dream transpired for them, learn from each other, and discuss some of the biggest issues in the private camp industry. Hi, everyone. My name is Howie Grossinger. I am the co-owner and director of Camp Robin Hood, a day camp in the suburbs of Toronto, Canada, as well as a co-owner of Camp Walden, an overnight camp in Northern Ontario.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kelly Shuna. I am co-owner and executive director of Hidden Pines Ranch Day Camp in Stillwater, Minnesota. If you are looking to find and subscribe to the Camp Owners Podcast, you can either find us online at gocamp.pro/ownerspod or by searching for us in your favorite podcast app. Finally, if you're listening to this and think it'd be useful to other camp owners or directors or aspiring camp owners in your circle, please feel free to send them a note to listen. Welcome back, Howie.
We are back. They re-signed us, Kelly. Look at that. We must have been doing pretty good work.
Lucky us. I know, year 4, that's kind of crazy. We're like almost done with a college career here.
Yeah, well, that's it. We are in our senior year of podcasting. That is really, really fun. It's great to see you. It's great to be back and looking forward to another season of great guests and great topics that are impacting the industry. You had a good summer?
I did have a good summer. I always feel like at this point, I'm like, I survived. I'm still a whole person. I came out of it. Yeah, no, it was a good summer. But I'm definitely enjoying this time of recharge and trying not to work too much. That doesn't always happen. But yeah, how was your summer?
Yeah, same. Got through it. Very different than our first year of operating in the pandemic, and we'll talk more about that throughout the season and today for sure. Just different feelings, feeling a huge sense of accomplishment, of course, and just morphing into sort of the next phase of our industry cycle, and looking forward to a little bit of downtime in the next several weeks. But yeah, just happy to be back and just sort of reflection and then lots of planning, which is what we do in this industry. And we've got 2 great guests we're going to introduce in a moment who have been through the cycle and going to share some thoughts about what to look forward to and looking back a little bit too. So just super excited for this season. But as you know, Kelly, we couldn't do this show if we didn't have the support of some great sponsors, and happy to kick off season 4 with a huge shout out to the OG sponsor, Camp Brain. They have been with us since the beginning. So this is their 4th season with us. They've been doing it since 1994 with 45 plus dedicated staff to meet your every need. If you're looking for software that provides you with everything you need to register and organize and keep the office flowing really well, I and Kelly encourage you to check out Camp Brain. Every interaction with your parents matters, and that's why Camp Brain made an elegant, easy to use parent experience, make it simple for parents to register multiple children, fill out all the necessary forms and paperwork as well. Just another reason to love your software. As I've said in the past, Kelly, I'm an original Camp Brain user here at our camps and just big fans and always super helpful whenever we need them. I encourage anyone in the industry considering a change or new software to their office admin, check out Camp Brain. Your partnership with Camp Brain only gets stronger after they put it in. So they have an incredible support team to help you every step of the way. Check them out at campbrain.com or call 866-485-8885. So here we are, topic number 1 of season 4, Kelly. We're just going to start with, we made it. Another camp season during COVID. Yet for some of us, it felt very different. Were we back to pre-pandemic camp? Let's talk about it. Was it more challenging than the previous 2 summers? Let's talk about that as well. And what about the staff? Oh, the staff. Let's talk about that. Are we looking pessimistically or optimistically at what the next 3 to 5 years are in store for us as camp operators, directors, admin? And we have two great guests that I think will help us with this conversation, Kelly. First off, we want to thank another returning guest. We have a short list of returning guests, and we're grateful that they're eager to come back. And we have Adam Baranker from Jeff Lake Day Camp in New Jersey, who joined us in the spring of last year in season 3. And we're happy to have him back. And we have a guest to the Camp Owners podcast. We have Adam Kronick, the owner-director of Camp Whitepine in Haliburton, Ontario, Canada. Welcome to the show, Adam ×2. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you, Howie. It's a pleasure to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me back. I'm super excited.
That's great. So we've had, as I mentioned, we've had Adam Baranker on the show, and what a wonderful conversation back. And I encourage you to check out that episode if you haven't heard it already. But Adam, we start every show with an update on sort of the origin story. And in your case, maybe just a little update where you've been in camping, what you do now, so our audience can get caught up on you. And then following that, Adam Kronick, I know you very well. I'm not going to start to tell everyone your story in camp. So I want to turn it over to you a little bit afterwards, just to tell us a little bit about your camp, your family, and your history in camping, which would be great. So Adam Baranker, what's the update for our audience?
Yeah, super excited to be back. I think why I'm most energized to be back is we had an awesome conversation in the spring. And in self-reflection, I am not sure how many of those things we talked about actually happened for me this summer, how I thought they were going to go. So I'm excited to unpack that a little bit. I think my camp story is still the same. This was my 31st summer at Jeff Lake, and I'm only 25. So I'm always confused about that math. But for me, I think what I'm really excited to unpack today is I have now kind of leaned into the fact that I know for the next couple of years with the pandemic of it all, that I am now a full-time staffing director in a much different way than I was pre-pandemic, in terms of how I have to keep changing my interview process, how I have to change how I interact with Gen Z. So I think my biggest camp update is I feel like I'm almost on the edge of the cliff, that the next hiring season is actually about to begin. And at some point, someone's going to push me off the cliff, and hopefully I have a parachute, because I'm not sure yet.
Yes, let me know where you got that parachute from. Okay, because that'll be important. But yeah, I know Kelly and I have been talking in sort of preparations for the season, how staffing will continue to be a topic we're going to explore. And Adam Kronick, sit back and relax, people. Adam is going to tell you his camp story.
Howie knows I can talk quite the talk. But the problem is, going after Adam, he's stealing my jokes. So, if I told you I've been at camp for, I think, about 62 or 63 summers, but I'm only 49, which I still type in on the treadmill, it's the truth. I've been there a long time. No, I've spent my whole life in camp, and it's been an interesting ride, as Adam said, and as we all said. And the last few years have certainly been challenging and different. And who would have ever imagined our jobs and lives and industry would change as it has in the last few years? And these are really good questions as to where it's going to go over the next few years. But it's been an incredible ride, and challenging, draining, exhausting, but rewarding. And one thing at the end of the day is to see how strong our industry is, and the value of camping is really special, and that it's withstood all these challenges.
Well, your humility is oozing through the microphone right now, but maybe just a little bit, Adam. Give our friends a little taste of the history of your camp. And
okay.
I think our audience would love to hear a little bit about that.
Sure. I was basically born in the camp. My father started Camp Whitepine in 1956. He had directed other camps in Ontario and Canada, and he was a youth group worker, and he started the camp with a vision, and we'll talk about later. But anyways, the camp has been in operation 67 years. And I grew up at camp, spent every summer of my life at camp. I did go to other camps a little bit, but basically I've been at camp every life. And I started directing in 1987. I met my wife at camp and she has been directing with me for over 35 years as well. So camp is her life, and now my two of my children are helping to run the camp as well. So I just sit back on the couch and relax and chill. That's my job now. I'm not very good at that.
I don't know if I believe that you're really doing that, Adam, that you're really sitting on the couch and chilling.
I try, but I'm not very good at it. No, it's actually amazing. It's a really, the to see how much camp is in our blood, how much I've loved it my whole life, and to see my kids, the thought of not doing it, how hard it was for them through COVID, really put everything into perspective. And it really is something that, it's indescribable as a lifestyle for people who have grown up with it. And those of you who've been to camp know.
Sounds like you're going to have to be a return guest to talk about that transition in your family. I'm so curious. So we thought it would be really great today to start off a little bit about just a synopsis of how your summer went. COVID, a thing or not, how are the kids? How are the parents? I think it's really interesting to see if there are some common themes, especially if there are themes among day camp and overnight camp, or if we all had really unique experiences that maybe there are some common threads. But I really would just love for everyone to kind of share a general synopsis of what their summer was like, and then maybe we can pick apart a few of those topics. Howie, do you want to start, or should we have one of our guests start?
Oh, for sure a guest. Adam Kronick, how did things go for you from a COVID perspective? Thing, not a thing? Vigilance, how is it different from in the 2 years that you operated?
Yeah, as Adam sort of alluded to at the beginning, the other Adam, uncertainty was a big part of it for each of the last 2 summers that we operated. We didn't know quite what to expect. I mean, we did all the work. 2 summers ago was very different from this past summer. So 2 summers ago, we were solely concerned with how do we stay healthy and how do we stay open, and be healthy. And it was a real challenge figuring that out with public health and with ourselves, developing, COVID protocols, figuring out what to do, how to operate in a bubble, and how to live camp in a much simpler, different world than it had existed in the past. And then this summer was much, much more back to normal. Back to camp as it was before COVID with some modifications. So it was two very different experiences. I can go into them after, but I don't want to take all the time. But completely different summers.
Yeah, and for me here at day camp in Toronto, because day camp, operates very much like the mindset of a school. COVID was very real in the sense that we had to, from a health perspective, with kids going home every day, as many of our listeners will know who are in the day camp world. I know that while local public health definitely were much more hands-off than they had been the year before, we felt a huge responsibility to do what we could, control the controllables. And we were one of those camps that had a vaccine mandate up here. It was controversial. We lost some families. We definitely took a hit. Even on social media, my camp got called out for being unreasonable and those things. And but from the vantage point of protecting staff, protecting the integrity of daily camp, and the traveling back and forth from home and camp, I was really proud of our team. We had some great systems. We had the ability to communicate well with families. Parents bought into protocols. And, overall, I felt from a COVID standpoint, we had really, we're a 10 out of 10. But COVID was so real in a very different way from the previous year. But camp did feel like normal. We did a lot of different things with mixing of cohorts, which is such a much bigger thing in some respect, at day camp, and although living at overnight camp, and of course I have an overnight perspective as well. I was really proud of our families. And I think that the sense, I think the proof in the pudding is that registration has opened, and boy, oh boy, are we happy that, parents clearly feel like things in our, in our world here went well. So they're coming back, which is great. So yeah, so that's the day camp from my perspective. Baranker, what are you feeling about COVID and how Jeff Lake did?
Yeah, I think for us, we never closed during COVID, as many of the day camps in New Jersey, when the sleepaway camps were closed, the day camps still found a way to be open. So in 2020, that was like to me, that was like our real COVID summer. We had half the population. We had some camp groups that were like 5 or 6 kids large. We're playing like a lot of soccer. It was like just like whatever we could do outdoors safely. And then, summer 2021, it was like, that was almost like our COVID summer, with trying to do as much as we could, even with protocols. And then, the Delta variant kind of flipped us on our head in summer 2021. This past summer, I almost felt like we were operating a little bit like how the schools are operating. It was, from a programmatic standpoint, we were back, and it felt amazing. I think it boosted staff morale to have a normal summer. It boosted camper morale. But at any given time, we maybe had 10 cases, no outbreak. So it could have been an 8th grader and a pre-Ker and an art specialist. So we weren't really battling any outbreaks and stuff like that. There were some campers and staff that still chose to wear a mask on the bus, even though we didn't make it mandatory. So it felt like the schools, in terms of, business as usual, but, we are still obviously living through this pandemic. But I think for us at Jeff Lake, having the 2 prior summers to really be able to boost the environment in terms of really going back to trips and special events and color days and all that kind of stuff it felt really nice. It did.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, congratulations. I'm a big fan of Jeff Lake's social media game, and Adam is quite a personality at his place. So it was nice to see you back. I got to get a glimpse of that over the summer. So congrats on that.
Thank you.
Kelly?
COVID, I would say the synopsis was that we did return, like Adam said, to I would say a more typical summer up from pre-pandemic. We did overnights with tents, we did offsite field trips, we did 2-night overnights offsite for our older campers. So we did return to a lot of that, return to a lot of the mixing of campers. We did have, we probably would say, an outbreak of COVID with our staff right after the American 4th of July holiday. I got COVID again. So that was really interesting. I became Queen COVID and would wave to campers from my deck. And staff would come up if they really needed me and stand 6 to 10 feet away. So that was interesting. And we had one week where I had 9 to 10 staff out with COVID, and we have a staff of 60. So we were, it was a little hairy for a little while, but we really leaned on alumni staff. And I just rallied the troops and literally texted my staff from the past 5 years. And hey, I don't even know if you're in Minnesota, but if you are interested in subbing at camp, and they rallied, and we did it, and we did it well. We did have some COVID with campers, but we definitely didn't have as much as we did with staff, which I think was, again, they were together more. We did staff events after camp. They really loved each other, as we want them to as a community. And so I just think they passed it to each other. And coming back from 4th of July, that was definitely an issue. And we did have all of our staff vaccinated. We did have that policy that all of our staff need to be vaccinated.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it was interesting for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And I got COVID after the first day of camp, and I missed the first week. And I was at home, and Sari, my wife, held down the fort with our wonderful team. But we had this phrase that it was like protect baby Yoda. So Sari was in her office, and she has a window. So it was like a drive-through McDonald's. People would talk to her through that. And we all managed. But yeah, the staff stuff for sure in day camp was really, really interesting for sure. I'm curious, Adam, about observations and experiences your staff had with kids and parents. We still went through, depending on the jurisdiction you are in and geography around some online school, most kids back. What did we see from kids returning to our wonderful social environment and interaction? And how did, what did you get a flavor of parents? What was the vibe about parents sending their kids back to camp? We all know that in some ways, the communication of the value of camp in some kind of weird way was enhanced by the pandemic, the value of camp, why we need camp. I know, but it also kind of spawned interesting behaviors by parents. Lots of time with kids. Was it a little overprotected? Was the tether short? Was it long? Did they have a tether? How were the kids? Did they have, skills in group dynamics? Were they back in sports teams, which helped us because they were on teams or groups and cabins at camp? I just want to open it up for a few minutes to talk about your observations with that. And then I think we'll jump into more staff stuff. But Adam Baranker, your thoughts on, day camp parents and day camp kids and what you saw and what you experienced?
Yeah, I think my overall observation is I think our campers really thrived this summer because I think for the fact that we have an environment where our campers come to camp and they don't really have any responsibility. I think that from the pandemic, that's really helpful, right? Their goal every day is show up, have fun, and then kind of rinse, repeat. And I think our parents were happy about that too, that it wasn't trying to figure out virtual school or trying to figure out the social distance birthday party that they were throwing for their child. It's just, we got it. Send your kid, let's have a good time. On the flip side, though, I think where I saw a challenge, which we'll maybe unpack in a little bit, is that the staff do have a responsibility. And on some level, they're just kids, right? So they're coming to camp to have fun, but they still have a boss and they have, job requirements. And I think that is where I saw the struggle more because it wasn't as unstructured as it was for our campers, where the campers got to come back and just live it and breathe it and do it. And like, how great is it to be like an 8-year-old at a day camp? Like that's like the best time of your life. But I think that, where our staff is struggling is that there's been so many pivots to their life the past couple of years. And I think the added pressure of responsibility and adult interaction and what we expected of them, that's where I saw the struggle. It wasn't really from the camper parent end. I think I've been kind of unpacking with my directors that like, everything front of the house was amazing. Like our parents and campers were so happy. The back of the house, managing a staff member who sent an email that was like really not written how it should be written and having a last minute, call out on a Sunday night. That's what we were managing with. But luckily it did not trickle out into the front of the house, which I feel really grateful about.
Yeah, I can totally identify with that. That's a great analogy, front of house and back house. I really like that for sure. Adam, what about you? You're a couple hours outside of Toronto, well-established camp, kids coming back, what did you see, in 2022?
Yeah, I think it was definitely different for overnight camps, at least for ourselves, than for the day camps. I wondered at the beginning of this year, I wondered how would COVID, first of all, would COVID be on everybody's mind? Would people be scared to hug each other? Would people be nervous to, jump all over each other, to live in a camper cabin together? And very quickly, that part of it, we learned that kids are kids, just like Adam said, and they jumped into it. And within a few days, the word COVID didn't exist and everybody was enjoying camp, and the anxieties from suddenly being in a cabin group, having been at home for so long, both summers, last summer and this summer, went away quickly. So the kids jumped right back into it. The parents, as everyone has said, were very eager to have the kids go to camp. I think the parents were more anxious, and I don't blame them because it's a whole different world, and their kids were coming to camp who really had never, up to 11 years old, had never been on a canoe trip. We have mandatory canoe trips. Every single child in camp, 11 and under, had never really been on a canoe trip. Everything was a new experience. So the parents were more anxious than the kids. But very quickly they saw the camp as camp and they jumped right back into it. But I wholeheartedly agree with Adam. The challenge of staffing, I know it's on the agenda for later, the challenge of staff young, staff who grow up at camp and relate beautifully to the campers, but they live in a different world, and the world has changed, and camp is sort of one place that stays the same. And we have to think about how we can make adjustments to make their experiences terrific while simultaneously providing sound leadership for the campers. So that is a big part of our future for sure.
Kelly, what about, at your camp, when you think about, kids coming back, your leaders and dealing with kids and parents, was it sort of the same as the year before? Like, what are you feeling?
I would say I do like Adam's front of the house, back of the house, which I think I've heard from a lot of other camp owners and directors. For us, my reflection of the summer was the very much camp is not a euphoria. It's a microcosm of what's happening out in the world. And I thought kids in general were much, I don't know, they were in a much better place than the summer prior. So I was so happy for that. And all the kids were happy to be back. Parents were happy to be back, all of those great things, and have some more normalcy. But I did see a lot of just kind of those real world issues more than I ever have before at camp. So definitely dealing with some, gender inclusiveness, campers being enrolled as one gender and identifying differently at camp. I had two different camper situations. One, parents were not accepting of it. And so navigating how to honor that kid and their choices and making them feel safe and included at camp. And then we had another camper where family was totally on board. And so I felt for me, it really was more, I felt like camp is that microcosm and dealing with some of those more bigger issues at more than we ever have before. So that was a lot of where my learning lied. And I felt like a lot of my work with families and parents and kids was focused this summer.
Yeah, I think our work with parents, talking about Adam's reference to parent anxieties, I think that parents, one of the features of what we've all been through is parents, pulling the trigger very quickly on labeling their kids' experience as catastrophic or so difficult, because in ways that I don't think we as a team here experienced in the past. My kid came home and described a situation, and I just feel like pre-pandemic and maybe even a few years before that, it would be seen as just, this is what my kid goes through. This is the pain of growing up. Like, this is it. But, I think that we're still seeing that. And I felt that having organizationally in our team, we expanded our leadership team and our organizational team because I needed more people here in a day camp environment on the phones responding so we could live up to the customer service that we promise. And I think there was a kind of a sweet spot between heightened parent calls and emails, curious in ways that we never experienced before, but a real sense that we had to respond in a timely fashion. And we just needed more people to do that who were skilled enough to respond and knew exactly what was going on. As a segue, and the last part actually I would mention is that if you think about it, and Adam Kronick doesn't have this experience like the three of us do, but the 4-year-olds that came to camp for the first time, like this was like their first time socializing. Like if you think about, it's really interesting. We really talked a little bit about the 4-year-old, the day campers come in and for being in a cabin or having, these young leaders or being in play groups the way they had been, in year pre-pandemic, the way kids did. So we had to, there were some observations related to that. So my segue into sort of the staff discussion, and I think Baranker got us going on this really well, is that, I can just simply say the 18-year-old staff member is not the 18-year-old staff member of the past, right? And we can also say to some extent, the 10-year-old camper isn't the 10-year-old camper. And the pandemic has kind of, has accentuated the impact in all kinds of ways. So when we think about the staff experience, I really just want to open it up to some of the learning and some of the things that you may be doing moving forward, as you recruit, as you are transparent about what they're getting themselves into, that kind of thing. So I thought, Adam Kronick, some thoughts about staff. And I know you have a large homegrown, group of people who come through, of course. And as we all do in overnight camp, we complement with international staff. But, what are your immediate thoughts of, the summer that was with staff and some of your things looking forward to 2023?
Yeah. I think, first of all, I think there is a difference between what parents expect and sometimes what staff are able to accomplish. Sometimes you get a, as you say, an 18-year-old male counselor or female, anybody, a counselor, and you're talking about cleaning a cabin, whether it's making a bed or doing folding clothes, forget hospital corners, or doing recycling, if you have recycling on the porch, or, and this might possibly be a new experience for them, for themselves, let alone for their campers. So we're facing, the teenagers could be at home, staying at home, where there's no one telling them that there's a curfew. There's no one telling them what to do. They just go hang out or do whatever. Maybe they have a job, versus going to camp where there's a structure and a routine that is completely normal. And part of the routine are tasks that may be completely foreign to them. So I think that, this summer was almost getting them more back into the camp routine, whether it be the cleanup, whether it be programming, and whether it be working with homesick kids. These are all challenges that are definitely newer to even the homegrown kids who've grown up at camp, because COVID put a delay in everything. So, we face a challenge in adjusting how we lead and guide and supervise and work with the young staff to help them become solid leaders. But it is a challenging task. I would put it that way.
Yeah, for sure. I had to show my day camp staff how to identify labels on clothing, because that was one of my sort of epiphanies of the summer of how things have changed, that I had to, through one of our Zoom weekly calls, some things we've taken for granted in terms of training and showing the job description, some things our team recognized early that, and this goes for overnight and day camp. When you see a space, we see it as clean or messy in a very differently than, our staff do, because, at home, maybe they're not required to, get things off the floor and stuff. So again, our team is now diving into, revamping or considering how we might address that in a way that, and Adam, I always look to Adam for my Gen Z stuff, but how they can pick that up and run with it. So you're not lecturing, but it could be creative or interactive and things like that. So Baranker, your thoughts? I know this is a.
Yeah, so when I was on the podcast in the spring, I thought I was like the Gen Z whisperer, and I learned this summer that there's no such thing as being able to totally understand this generation. I almost felt like this summer a little bit like someone asked me to be a camp director like on Mercury, and I had never met the population of that planet before. But I have no choice. I'm the camp director, so I have to relearn how Mercury camps get their stuff done on that planet. And I think for me, like I'm always in the head of kind of like the interview process and how I want to change orientation next year. And I think for me, the two kind of stamps that came out of this summer that I really want to unpack is that one is that, one of my favorite things about Gen Z, and when I work with them from a youth group standpoint, is they are a extremely woke generation in ways that millennials and Gen Xers were not. I think we even might have spoken about this in the spring, that they're up on social justice issues, and they're up on gender equality, and they want to have a voice, and they use social media, have that voice. But what I think is happening now is that they're having trouble with the differentiation of when and where to be woke, right? So if you're woke for an issue that means a lot to you, use that voice. But in a job, you still have an administration, a camp director who you can't necessarily speak to in the way that you would to speak up to an injustice that you see on social media, or, you know, to go march in a protest. And I think that there is something that I want to try to get out to our staff, that this is still a job and there are still job requirements that, you know, you have to meet, and a professional way to speak to a coworker and a colleague. And I think with that, I also want to help them unpack the differentiation. And I'm laughing because it sounds funny in theory, but it really is something I think that would help them, is that there's a difference between a workplace injustice and a workplace requirement or protocol, right? So for example, like if I tell all of my under 18 staff that you get a half-hour break every day, and then I don't give it to you, that's not nice. That's a workplace injustice. You can speak up on behalf of that and say, in my contract, it said I get a half-hour break, and I will work that out with you. But if there is just something that is a job requirement of yours, and your director or your division head, group leader, whatever you call it in your camp, is telling you that you are not doing it correctly, or you're not doing it at all, that's not an injustice. That's not us trying to be rude or unkind. That is just something that is part of the job requirement that you're not filling. And I think what I was seeing this summer is a lot of my staff saw every directive as an injustice. And I was like, how do I get any point across if it's always that like I am being a unjust leader when I just need the bunk clean at the end of the day? Because who wants a dirty bunk? You know, it was like, so that's kind of what I'm trying to unpack right now, is how to have our staff kind of understand what their job requirements are, maybe really early. Maybe it's at the incubator stage in the interview. And I have to be more clear about that, but that is something that I definitely struggled with this summer.
Is that
Adam, oh, I was just going to ask Adam, so was their reaction, tell me just a little bit more about their reaction. Was it like, I don't think you should be asking this of me, or I don't want to do that? Or like, so every time you asked them to do something, they were like kind of questioning why, or they just were like, I don't feel like this is a part of my job?
That's a great, yeah, I want to differentiate that. It was never that they didn't know, they didn't think it was part of their job and they wouldn't do it after the directive, but the initial ask was met with an eye roll, a frustration, a answer back, you know, where it was some real simple stuff sometimes that, and I will really say, and I don't want to blame everything on the pandemic, because I feel like that feels like a scapegoat a little bit, but pre-pandemic, I didn't have that. I really didn't. You know, if I gave a staff member a directive, they might have rolled their eyes behind my back and vented to their co-counselor about me. But the amount of it that I was getting face-to-face this summer, or in a text message that night, someone, you know, a 17-year-old calling me out for something that happened that day in a really not professional manner, it was a little bit of a problem this summer.
do you think that's partly due, is that because this is a world where I know when I went to high school, granted that was a gazillion years ago, you might get in the 70s or maybe in the 80s if you did really well. And now you see marks in high school in the 90s and 95 and 98, which didn't exist when I was younger. Is it because this is a world where people have never been told no before, or they have never been asked to do something that's different, that they don't want, or had to do anything they don't want to do, or being told that, you know, 95 is not even good enough and you need to have 98, and you know, is that, do you think that's part of it?
Yeah,
Well,
I think there's, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, I think it's just a feature of the coddling that a lot of, you know, this generation who now are our staff, who need to take responsibility of, you know, aren't embracing in the way that I think other generations of staff that we have, you know, that we've worked with for sure. Adam, I can totally identify with what you described in terms of the frustration of those interactions. And I would say that there's, and I don't know if others feel this way, but there is a boldness by which I hire 16-year-olds, right, 10th graders and older, but there's a boldness with, you know, the snapping back or the outward display of disappointment that you were asked to, you know, be in the water with your 5-year-old swim group, which is something we covered ad nauseum, you know, as part of training and pre-training, etc. So that was frustrating. And if we're all gonna potentially get vulnerable right now. And again, I don't want to make this, there are so many, our staff were awesome this summer.
Yes, I
across
agree.
the board.
I agree.
I just want to declare that I'm so proud of my staff and the experience they gave kids. I called 2021 Let Kids Be Kids. Like, this was Let Kids Be Kids 2.0, because the staff were engaged in a breadth of program that allowed them to engage in daily and special event activities at camp that, brought us back to, this is the way camp is supposed to be. So I want to just say to everyone, like, and I think you'll all agree, like, I'm so proud of my staff. Having said that, and if we're getting a little vulnerable right now, I pride myself on being out there with my staff and my campers. There were days where I was kind of going for my regular walkabouts, and my interactions, which are such a feature of the way I operate, I was kind of apprehensive because everyone tells you exactly how they're feeling. And this double-edged sword of, we're here to support your mental health and all the good things we must do, and we do genuinely, sometimes is used as, I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm really anxious. And I have found, honestly, that some of the interactions over the course of the last couple summers have not been a normal conversation. A normal interaction with a staff member sometimes leads into a 10-minute conversation because they want to unpack everything with me, and at a moment where it may not be the best time, and I want to be sensitive to that. I don't know if you can identify with that, but I just some of those interactions were I just way more intense than I remember them being in past summers. And me and my team want to be there, but just time and place and stuff like that. I don't know if you can identify with that to any degree, but that was a takeaway with my staff interactions that was very different than previous summers.
Yeah, and I think, going off of what Adam had mentioned about, what is like the origin of all this, I think for me, one thing that I kind of self-reflected on a little bit, because I always do, like you said, our staff was amazing this summer. Our campers were obsessed with them. Our parents are already calling them to babysit. Like, they were great, but we do like that back of the house that comes back, right? The curtains closed, and we have to, as directors, it's our job to put energy into stuff. So for me, one of the self-reflections I had is that in virtual school and in, like sports teams being taken away, these Gen Zers had very little adult interaction besides their family for a year and a half, maybe even pushing 2 years, where their teachers were on Zoom. They didn't even necessarily have to have their camera on, right? They were taking sports lessons from home, so they weren't, interacting with a coach that maybe didn't like them that much, and they had to navigate that. So I think for a lot of my staff this summer, the adults that were working with them were some of the only admin type people they've had in their life since before the pandemic. So I think that, to almost like give them a little, support is that, like, they might not know how to interact with me during the summer. They might not know how to get a directive, but maybe it's my job during the interview to let them know what my role is, and to let them know what, their division head's role is, which I don't know that I really do well in the past during the interview process and during the staff orientation. But I think, they have to know why these people are in place at camp to support them and mentor them, but also make sure that they're driving the ship in the direction we need it to be going, which is important.
Yeah, I find a little bit of a different track. Again, our staff was absolutely incredible this year. I felt so lucky to have such great people working with our campers. But I think that we're always trying to find a balance between having the staff have fun while prioritizing their kids. I feel that the staff are thinking about themselves possibly more than in the past. And, whether it's they want to go play hockey late at night, like as a 24-hour experience, an overnight camp, it is different. And when it's bedtime or an hour after bedtime, or staying the extra hour after bedtime, and they want to go play hockey or do something else. And, I think that I find us spending a lot more time as a senior leadership group planning and working with our staff to create an atmosphere where they have fun, as well as obviously providing the incredible experience for the kids. So that's a big challenge, I think, for all of us. I mean, and also working with them rather than just giving them everything, rather than just handing the staff experiences. I want them to be part of the collaborating and part of the process, so that they have ownership into programming and their own fun experience outside of the campers as well. So I think that's a big challenge for us in the near future.
Well, I think it's a balance between harnessing this generation's passion and, like you said, Adam, their wokeness, and they want to be a part of that mission. So harnessing that, but also, and in those right moments, but balancing, there are times when we have to make decisions and we have to pass down, here is what's happening, and we can't involve them in, I mean, that was something I noticed, is they want to be involved in all of that decision making and direction, but there are situations where, as owner, director, what your role is, you have to be like, here's what we're doing, and you have to trust that I have put the thought into why and considered all of you. And so I just think there's so many interesting balances. It feels like such a balance right now of harnessing who they are, but also those expectations, like you talked about, Adam, of like, well, this is also a realistic job expectation. And, it's a realistic job expectation that you won't be involved in every single decision of your job, or, there will be times when we will give feedback and ask you to do things. So it feels like a balance for sure.
And I think we as an industry and the people who lead all of our camps, I mean, there's, we recognize, to get the most out of our staff, we've got to demonstrate, and we do, such a genuine concern for every aspect of their experience with us. But balancing a generation that is probably more self-aware of their feelings and where they're at than ever before, and being sensitive to that, which I think we do a great job at. And also, as Baranker said, like, just finding that messaging about, we can address those things and we can work with you, but we also have you signed up for a certain experience that, aside from all the fun and the dress up and all this stuff, there are some real world responsibilities, even in this environment, that you have to do. And I know, as Adam talks about an overnight camp setting, I think we want staff to continue to come back. And I know that we're finding a generation of camp staff that are cutting out of, their camp experience much earlier than ever. So we're inclined to give them all the bells and whistles and the great experience and all that good stuff. But you almost want to say, look what we give you, and we need this. And you don't want to lecture. So you have to pre-think about how you're going to set them up going into the summer with a deep understanding of, this is what we're about, but we need you here doing X. And when those worlds come together, like, we know the magic that happens. Yet there is this trend, I think, where we're seeing some staff who, as woke and as wonderfully thoughtful as they all are, sometimes don't embrace the fact that, hey, I came here to do a job sometimes. And I think I think both Adams have highlighted that for sure. What an interesting topic. We have a lot of months ahead of us to forge a plan for communication and how we're gonna, and I would be interested for both of you, if I could just ask a quick question, because I'm kind of we're all in that, depending on our operational cycle, where we're going to be revisiting interviews with last year's staff. Like, how much are we willing to do a deep dive into some of the things that we didn't really like as a springboard to coming back? And how honest are we being versus, we don't want to lose this person? The classic guys, but the kids love them, right? But some of them may be a little deficient in some of their performance. Are we going after that? Adam and Adam, like, are you thinking about that? I mean, honest and open conversation about X, but boy, I really don't want to lose this person either. So how upfront in November, December, January are we going to be? Any immediate thoughts? I don't know what your processes are. I'm curious about how you do that re-interview stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's a delicate balance. There's no question. And I don't have the right answer. Again, maybe this is a society where they've never been told they're not doing a perfect job, and to give some constructive feedback that will help them do better. I just think it's part of the process. I mean, what we do is our process for returning staff, let's say, is we do an audio letter. My kids, Jesse and Sammy, actually do them. We do an audio. I used to I used to dictate 225 letters, and Francis, who worked in my office for 60 years, would type them out before. This is before computers, guys, and then obviously that it was easier with computers. But now we do audio letters. And how honest are you in the audio letter, and then how honest are you in the interview, is a really good question. But I do think we owe it to our kids and the staff to really give them constructive feedback to help them do that better job. I don't think it discourages them from coming back. I think the tougher question is for the returning staff, that person on the borderline of whether you want them back or not, is like, yeah, I know they're friends with so-and-so, and if we don't have them back, maybe their friend won't come, and the kids do love them, as Howie said, and what do I do there? So those I think are the challenging conversations. But I do think we have to stick to our guns and place expectations, realistic and positive, constructive expectations on people to help them do better in the future.
Yeah, I think for me, and this might seem a little blunt, but for how open our staff are, I feel like now I am matching them, and I feel as equally open to give them the feedback. Because in a sense, I'm like, if you're feeling this comfortable to, deliver a message the way that you delivered it this past summer, I'm feeling pretty comfortable to deliver the message right back to you, which I laugh a little bit, but I think, and I think, where, like I said, I landed on Mercury, right? It's a new world that we're living in, and I'm still the camp director, and I still need to be able to get out the message I need. I think I am putting a weight more on, if they are trying to make Jeff Lake the best place that it can be, in their attitude and in their drive and in their spirit for camp, not just that the kids love them. And there might be some people who I don't think had Jeff Lake's best interest in mind this summer, but the kids adored, that I will not have returning this summer. And it's like such an oxymoron a little bit, because it's going to make my staffing job harder, right? Because I think pre-pandemic, I would have asked those people back just so it was one less spot I had to fill. But, I want to staff every summer. And Kelly, this is going back to what you said a little bit. Maybe it is that I'm striving for that utopia, and I need to let myself know that that's not really what it is. But I want as many staff as I can get that are going to be bought into the Jeff Lake brand and love it and breathe it and respect it. And what I'm actually finding right now is that the 1, 2, 3-year counselors are respecting the process more than the 5, 7, 8, 9, 10-year counselors. So I'm kind of excited to get some fresh blood again, personally.
Yeah, and day camp for us, day camp staff turnover is significant, and we have a lot of new people, and onboarding them with the experience of the returners, there's a sweet spot, in terms of the influence they have. But boy, oh boy, I think we've all felt from time to time how getting a fresh blood on your staff team who may not have had a camper experience with you is just a wonderful opportunity to get them on board quickly and enthusiastically, and living up to the expectations that we've set, in ways that some of the other staff that have been with us seem to not be consistently doing. So I think that's a good point. So that was 2022. Just how's 2023 looking, everybody? Have we started registration? Are we done registration? Have you started staffing? What's going on? What's a brief look as Kelly and I look to talk about 2023 and upcoming episodes? Give us a sense of how each of your camps are doing, or at this level in the industry.
Want to go on?
Go ahead,
Sure.
Baranker.
We are doing great at Jeff Lake, and I think it is a direct reflection of the past summer that we just had. We had a lot of fun, and I think it was a mental health boost that a lot of people needed. Also, just from like a camp industry standpoint, because I know the people listening might find this interesting, but we had a lot of people that moved out of the city and out of like Hoboken, Jersey City type places into the suburbs during the pandemic. So, you know, they wanted the backyard and the suburban experience when people weren't leaving their homes, and they, you know, caught the market that was hot, you know, at the right time of the pandemic. So we at Jeff Lake, we even just have a bigger population to pull from, because I think more young families moved into our area, which is great for us. And I think for 2023, I think, you know, a big thing our team has been talking about is, with so many new families and so many new, you know, types of families and things that have changed for the pandemic, we're really picking apart our program this off season. We are looking for new activities that we can do that maybe aren't like a capital improvement, right? It's not necessarily a structure that we're replacing or plopping down in camp, but we are looking at activities that we can maybe remove, add, change, what's working, what's not working. And I think, you know, pre-pandemic, we were always like, what's so great about Jeff Lake is the tradition of it all, that kids come back for this experience that their parent had or their older sibling had. But I think with the way the world works now, we always need to be looking at what's next and what's hot and what's not. And I think that that's going to be a big part of our off season.
Love that. Adam Kronick.
Yeah, very similar. I mean, we had an incredible summer, so the spirit and the energy leading forward to next year is crazy. I mean, registration is basically done. The demand was insane this year. We made some enemies by not getting kids in, but that being said, we did our best to accommodate everybody, and it looks to be a great summer. So now, you know, moving forward, we're just doing the usual, as Adam said, evaluating everything from activities to construction, maintenance, to policies and the way we deal with things, to how we deal with staff, to how we deal with campers, everything. And that'll be a year-long process that we do to say, where do we move forward? Because every day is a new day, and what worked in the past may work in the future, but it may not, and something may be different. And so that's what we're doing. We're just every day discussing what to do and how to make changes and how to make improvements, and where to go from there. So it looks to be a great summer, and staffing will start soon. And there'll be a lot of work put into that for sure.
Yeah, 2023. I'm still not ready to think about it, but that's okay. That's terrible, isn't it? I'm still in the reflecting phase.
Kelly, you should open registration now.
Stop pressuring me to do that, Howie. No, that's okay. It is something I need to consider. Our registration opens in January. And so I think things will be great for registration. Staffing, it is thinking about, you know, like you said, Adam, of who do we want to come back? I am just hopeful that I was very clear and kind during my check-ins and my evaluations, that I always wanted to say that there shouldn't be any surprises if I have concerns. But I do think that if they're as free with their feedback, that we need to be as free and open with ours. So I just am thinking a lot about staffing. I don't know if there's any, you know, drastic changes to our programming, but I do in the next couple of months just really want to piecemeal feedback from other camps that I'm hearing about some of the staff things, and what is that about, and how can we, you know, like you said, Adam, train differently. Or like in my interviews, I'm super transparent about how hard this job is and expectations and things like that. And but just what are those pieces that we need to put in place now and leading up to 2023 to help ourselves and to help other camps to not maybe have as many of those struggles, and embrace our staff and who they are and what they're bringing. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about. What about you, Howie?
Yeah, we've you know, thankfully have had a wonderful start to registration for 2023, and it's really given us a great opportunity, I think, as both Adams have said, to, you know, think about our program and enhancements. And I don't necessarily think we're, you know, as Adam said, we're not going with huge capital investments, but we're finding that tweaking the daily program, the schedule, you know, those types of things continue to be where we can deliver best on the promises we make about what we do here. And I think that last summer, with some organizational changes of leadership and people, on our team, it really was satisfying to know that we can handle what we talked about earlier, some of the increased demands of camper behavior and parent demand, and the intensity of the requirement for customer service, which is always a hallmark of what we've tried to do, is delivering that. And so I think it's just going to be, how do we just, build on that? And I love that. But there's no doubt that given where we're at with registration, you can see what, what you need. So you got to get on it. I lost 35 staff from the middle of May to the middle of June last year who decided to ghost me or walk away. Right. So from a day camp perspective, from any camp perspective, I don't even have to qualify it. I lost 35 staff in 30 days, and I had to have them all in place for staff training, which here up in Canada starts closer to July. So that was about as stressful as it can, because, whether it's salary or parent pressure, Baranker and I, that's why, I love these conversations with Baranker, because we're always thinking about how do we sell this experience so they can know what they're getting and what they're in for. And you can only cross your fingers and hope they stick with it. And kind of rolling the dice was my experience last year. So I'm hoping we won't have that same situation, but it's nice knowing what our needs are and how we can shape our next several months to get the team in place in the best possible way. So that's where I'm at for 2023. Kelly, we got some more thank yous to do, don't we?
Yes, we do. Before we get to our wrap up and our inspiration, we have to thank our second sponsor, which is Camptivities. You can quickly search for Camp Activities Scheduler and you come across Camptivities. I know that some camps and groups are using this for their off season. So right now, thinking about how they can use Camptivities for their programming in their off season, for rental groups, for school groups, things like that. So we encourage people to check out Camptivities because it's more than just summer. It can be in your off season as well. And it is owned by the most amazing Ryan Rosen. It can do group scheduling, camper scheduling, batch scheduling. So instead of relying on just one person to make your schedules, you can rely on Camptivities. If you want to check them out, you can go to camptivities.com. You can set up a time to chat and they can help you get away from your desk maybe and get back out to camp or not rely so heavily on one person. So check out Camptivities today.
Yes. Thank you to our sponsors. So Season 4, we're continuing with inspiration, things that we are reading or, inspiring us. And we always ask our guests to get us going. And by way of good modeling, which is something we all do as great camp leaders, Kelly Shuna, would you like to kick us off with your inspiration to kick off our season?
I sure can. Mine is from a podcast that I listened to, a Glennon Doyle podcast. But it was a woman named Dr. Becky. I don't know if you've heard of Dr. Becky, but she has a podcast called Good Inside. And she also wrote a book. It really is definitely geared more towards parenting, but I think there's some really good, well, I'm a parent, so I can always capitalize on that, but it had some really good feedback and, ideas about really starting from a place of everyone is good inside and really acknowledging and looking at where that behavior is coming from. And I almost felt like it could be a great resource for parents. I know that parents reach out to us as camp professionals. And so if you look up Dr. Becky and Good Inside, I really liked what she had to say. So that's my little inspiration of someone new in my podcast listening world. What about you, Howie?
Well, I'm going to go last because I'm going to turn things over to our guests. So Adam Kronick, anything inspiring you these days that you'd like to share with the audience?
As I sort of mentioned before, I think with COVID, especially 2 years ago when we were running a much simpler operations, it brought back the reminder that what camp is really all about, the people, the values, the culture, and the way people relate to each other in this unique atmosphere. So I was up at camp this past weekend, and up on the wall in our camp is a brochure. It's a frame. Our brochure is sort of cut up into pieces. Our initial brochure from 1956 that my father wrote, and it's framed and it's up there. And I do read it every spring. And when I do, it's hard not to be inspired. And he talks about, you know, a unique experience in small group living where counselors provide love and limits. And campers work together, collaborate, compromise, and learn how to live together under the guidance of these mature, caring staff. And it's, you know, I read that, even saying it, I'm having trouble saying it because it brings so much emotion to me. And anytime when things go bad in camp, or when things are moving away from the values and the culture that we're trying to create under the premise of what my father set out, I try and think back to that. And the good news is that I really believe those values and those beliefs have stood the test of time, and they really still work in camp. So that's what's inspired me in the past, and it still does. And I will continue to work towards that in the future.
Yeah, thank you for that, Adam. I appreciate that very much too, because I had the wonderful opportunity to know your dad very well. So that's great. Adam Baranker, what do you got?
Yeah, tough act to follow, Adam. That gave me some chills listening to you. So, so for any of my friends that are listening, they're gonna probably make fun of me that I picked this, because I found a tweet from Adam Grant, who is like one of my gurus, and I repost him on my Instagram all the time. So I'm going back to an easy source here, but he tweeted this actually like right after camp, and I felt like he was talking to me directly. So in this tweet, he said, "The people who are nice to you aren't always being kind to you. Saying what you want to hear is nice. People sugarcoat feedback to make you feel good today. Sharing what you need to hear is kind. People speak honestly to help you do better tomorrow. Candor is an act of care." And that is something that I really want to get across to my staff this summer, to drive all the staffing stuff we just spoke about, because I really want them to know that when I'm providing feedback, I am really trying to be the best mentor and friend and camp director that I can be, and not just be the principal coming in to, you know, wave my ruler and give them, you know, a feedback for something that I need. So thank you, Adam Grant, for always saying things much more eloquently than I can. It's very helpful.
Amen to that. I nerded out with Adam Grant. We've got a little Instagram sharing thing of his posts amongst our leadership team. So I'm a member of that club as well. So cool. I'm glad you threw that in. For me, it's the 25th anniversary of one of my favorite books of all time, Tuesdays with Morrie. And I'm a big fan. I try to reread it when I can. And it, you know, with the anniversary coming up and thinking about that book and the role that wisdom and life lessons and having people in your life who can provide you with, you know, perspective on what's important and what you should be focusing on. I think in many ways, all of our camp experiences have ended up the way that they have been because we've benefited from that wisdom. You know, as I mentioned, you know, I've been in lots of meetings, you know, with Adam's dad back in the day, and just, you can't get enough of that stuff. And I just always feel like for Kelly and I, as we considered, you know, moving forward with the show, you know, we want this every episode to be some perspective and some thought-provoking stuff and some ways that you may want to tweak or adjust the way you do. And I want to thank the two of you, of course, because you guys have kicked the season in such a fine way with having, I hope, our audience thinking, you know, about perspective and lessons and how we can provide those lessons to our staff and to our camp community. So Tuesdays with Morrie, I think many people in the world have read it, but reread it. It's a good thing to check in and get back on your mind. So that's my inspo for this time of the year. Kelly?
Just adding in all of our little resources here.
Nice.
All right. So as we wrap up, if our listeners, lovely listeners, would love to connect with our guests, especially Adam K., how can they connect with you? What's the best way to reach you?
They can reach me through adam@campwhitepine.com or www.campwhitepine.com or 416-322-6250 or yell really loud.
Adam Baranker.
Yeah, you can shoot me an email to adam@jefflakecamp.com, or you can find me on Instagram @Adam Baranker. I do a lot of my Adam Grant sharing like you do, Howie, and inspirational quotes and current events that are relevant to Gen Z and all that stuff through my Instagram. So would happy to have you find me there as well.
Amazing. And you can find me at howie@camprobinhood.ca. And you can also find me on Instagram at Howie Grossinger. So look forward to ideas and suggestions for upcoming episodes, and look forward to you joining us in future shows. Kelly, how do people get a hold of you?
My email is Kelly with a Y at hiddenpinesranch.com or at KJShuna3 on Instagram. Please don't forget, you can find all of our show notes at gocamp.pro/ownerspod. You can find the resources we mentioned, our inspiration, our contact information, lots of good stuff there and from previous episodes. We hope you enjoyed this. Thank you for listening to episode 1, season 4. Adam B, Adam K. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We could have talked for hours, so this is challenging to keep it so short. But I think it was a great intro to the season and what is on camp owners and directors' mind, and it makes me excited to talk more. So thank you so much, and we hope you enjoyed the show.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.